The Parker-Hulme case, When Children Kill, a chilling true story, narrated by Echoes Unknown. This is not a made-up story. This is not a creepypasta or an urban legend. This is a true case that shook an entire country and inspired one of the most disturbing films of our time. In 1954, two intelligent, imaginative, and inseparable teenage girls committed one of the most chilling murders in New Zealand's history. This is the story of Pauline Parker and Juliet Hulme, and the brutal killing of Pauline's own mother. A crime so unsettling. It still echoes today. Tuakadinawans, era background. Christchurch, New Zealand, 1950s Christchurch, New Zealand. A quiet, conservative city in the 1950s. Post-war life was stable, structured, and bound by rigid social norms. It was in this setting that two teenage girls, Pauline Parker and Juliet Hulme, met and formed a bond that would defy everything around them. Pauline was the daughter of working-class parents, smart but withdrawn. Juliet was the daughter of a prominent intellectual, Henry Hulme, the rector of Canterbury College. Juliet had a privileged upbringing, but her childhood was marked by illness and isolation. Her parents moved frequently, and she often spent long periods apart from them. She contracted tuberculosis as a child and was sent to live in the Bahamas for recovery. The two girls met at Christchurch Girls High School, and from the moment they did, their friendship became obsessive, intense, and eventually deadly. The friendship is a shared fantasy world. Pauline and Juliet didn't just become best friends. They created entire imaginary worlds, elaborate stories, kingdoms, royalty, rituals. They wrote novels and plays together, often filled with violence and sexual tension. Their fantasy world was vivid and immersive, and more real to them than the world around them. They referred to it as the fourth world, a spiritual, perfect realm that only they could understand. They believed they were special, superior, chosen. The adults around them saw their closeness, but few grasped how deep it went. By 1953, concerns started to grow. The girls were becoming emotionally entangled, and rumors began to spread. Homosexuality at that time was not only taboo, it was considered a mental illness, and even criminal in many societies, including New Zealand. Juliet's parents became alarmed. They decided to separate the girls. The Hulmes were planning to divorce, and Juliet was to be sent away to South Africa to live with relatives. This decision would become the catalyst for what came next. The murder of Honora Parker, 22nd June 1954. On June 22nd, 1954, the girls invited Pauline's mother, Honora Reaper, often referred to by her maiden name, Parker, for a walk in Victoria Park, a wooded area near Christchurch. They had planned everything. They brought with them a brick wrapped in a stocking, hidden inside a bag. The three walked along a trail. At a secluded spot, Juliet dropped a pink stone on the path, a signal. As Honora bent down to look at it, the girls struck. They beat her repeatedly in the head, over 20 times with the brick. The crime was brutal, frenzied. But even more disturbing was the cold, calculated way they carried it out. They didn't run. They walked back to the tea kiosk at the park, covered in blood, and claimed there had been an accident, that Honora had slipped and hit her head. But the truth was quickly uncovered. The murder weapon was found. And so was the diary. Pauline's diary, the confession. Pauline had been writing everything. Her diary was chilling, a window into the growing madness and obsession that had taken root. She described the plan. She wrote about their fantasy world. She wrote of her willingness to kill and how she believed it would free her and Juliet to be together forever. One entry written days before the murder read, "The day of the happy event." I am writing a little of it up now, as I shall be very busy after it happens. It is only 10 o'clock, and my stomach is beginning to churn with excitement. The happy event, that was how she described killing her mother. And Keshi the treaty. National shock and global fascination. The girls were arrested the same day. Their trial in August 1954 became one of the most infamous in New Zealand's legal history. They were just 16 and 15 years old. The press was relentless. The nation was horrified. There was public outrage over the brutality, but also fascination with their personalities. Were they mad? Were they evil? Were they lovers? Psychiatrists debated whether their intense bond was pathological. The court didn't need to prove motive, only guilt. And both girls were found guilty. But due to their ages, they were spared the death penalty. Instead, they were sentenced to be detained at Her Majesty's pleasure, a form of indefinite imprisonment for minors. They served 5 years in separate facilities. Mock aftermath, a life apart. After their release, they were given new identities and forbidden from ever contacting each other again. Juliet Hume moved to the UK. She later became a successful crime novelist under the name Anne Perry. That's right. The teenage murderer went on to write best-selling detective fiction, even having her books adapted into films. Her identity remained a secret until the 1990s, when a journalist made the connection. Pauline Parker also changed her name and lived quietly in England, eventually working with disabled children. Both women reportedly expressed remorse, and both lived lives far away from the country where they had once been infamous. Creedy Wariter, Legacy, Heavenly Creatures and Modern Obsession. In 1994, director Peter Jackson, yes, the same Peter Jackson who made The Lord of the Rings, created a film called Heavenly Creatures, based on the case. The film starred Kate Winslet as Juliet and brought international attention to the story. It portrayed the fantasy world, the diary entries, the planning, and the violence. But even that film only scratched the surface of the psychological complexity behind this case. What does this mean? The Parker-Hulme case forces us to ask difficult questions. How much control do teenagers really have over their impulses? Was this a case of folie à deux, shared madness between two girls? Or were they fully responsible, calculating, and evil? What happens when reality bends under the weight of delusion, obsession, and repression? And what happens when that delusion turns deadly? This was not just a murder. It was a tragedy born of fantasy, control, and a friendship that became a prison. This was the true story of Pauline Parker and Juliet Hume, a case that has haunted New Zealand for over 70 years. If you're drawn to the darkest corners of human psychology, if you believe that truth is often stranger than fiction, then subscribe to Echoes Unknown, where we explore the disturbing, the unsolved, the tragic, and the unforgettable. Every week, we bring you true stories from history and the headlines. Like, comment, and share if you want more cases like this one. And remember, sometimes the most terrifying monsters are the ones still wearing school uniforms.